Let's bring it all together by building out a conversation about baggage that a traveler wants to take on a flight. Our traveler wants to know if they can bring a bag on board or if they need to check the bag. If they do need to check the bag, they want to know if there are any fees involved. To build this out, we'll introduce a new concept, a lookup node. I'll talk about lookup nodes later in this video. How do we get started? A good way to approach building out conversations is to actually write out the dialogue. You can start by writing what is often called the happy path, meaning how does the conversation look if everything goes right and the user and the bot understand each other clearly. For this scenario, it'll go something like this. The user will say, "Can I bring my bag on board, or do I have to check it?" The bot will say, "You can bring one bag and one personal item on the plane. Your carry-on bag should fit in the overhead bin," and then a lot of details about what a carry-on bag and a personal item should look like. The user might respond, "It's a golf bag. Do I have to pay extra if I need to check it?" The bot can ask, "Are you flying first class?" And the user will respond yes or no. The bot can ask, "How heavy is the bag?" And based on the weight that the user specifies, it can either be free or there could be extra fees involved, or they might not be able to bring the bag on the flight after all. In real life, we might make this more of a personalized interaction, finding out the user's individual bag allowance for their flight, knowing their status in our frequent flyer program, and giving them the option to pay any additional baggage fees from within the chat itself. But if this is an anonymous user, and we don't know if they've even booked a flight yet, this is a potential interaction we could have that can provide better service than calling our contact center and waiting on hold. It's helpful to write all of this out so you can start with a dialogue in mind before you build your flows. We'll ask a variety of questions and provide intelligent responses in the flow we'll build in this session. Imagine that we've written out the happy path. Now we can identify the intents and lexicons we'll need for our flow. We have two intents here. We'll call the first one baggage rules carry-on, and the second one baggage rules checked bag. Note that I'm including the category name in the intent name to help organize my intents in the intent editor. I don't necessarily need any new lexicons here, but I'll continue to use my airport codes lexicon in case users say something like, "Can I bring my suit bag on my flight to DUS?" Or "Can I take my skis on board for my trip to DEN?" It's also good to think about the channels I want to share this on. Will it be web chat, SMS, voice? For now, I'll assume we want this just for web chat, but I want to keep other channels in mind as I'm building out the flow in case I want to expand my channels in the future. That's all I need to think about for now, so I'll start building my flow. I'll go to NLU at the top to open the intent editor. My first intent will be the carry-on intent. And I'll create some example sentences. I'll save and build. For my carry-on bag intent, I just need to give a response to the user. You may recall that I can handle basic question and answer scenarios in a default reply. This means I don't have to add to my flow to respond. I'll add my response, save and build. Now let's test it in the interaction panel. I'll ask, "Can I take my golf bag on board?" Note that nothing happens. I have expert mode on, which means I would see if there's an intent match. How can I improve this intent? Well, I could simply add the example sentence to my intent, and that would give me a 100% match. I could add a number of variations for different kinds of bags like suit bags, purses, and ski bags. Or I could create a lexicon with all of the potential bag types. It's a little more work, but I might find this lexicon useful as I implement other dialogues, so I'll go ahead and create it. I'll go to Build and then Lexicons and create a new lexicon called baggage. I searched online and found a list that I'll use as a starting point. I'll put these into a CSV file. I'll add my bag type slot name, and upload. Now I'll add a couple of synonyms. I'll add camera bag for camera case bag and computer bag for laptop bag. Now I'll go back to my flow and click on the NLU tab. To use the lexicon I just created, I need to select it under Attached Lexicons. I'll also make sure my airports and airlines lexicons are enabled. Now I'll update my intents. For the first example sentence, I'll annotate it. I'll select bag, click the plus sign, and then select my bag type slot. While I'm at it, I'll also add an example with airport codes. Let's build the model and test again. And I get the intent match I expect. I'll try with another bag type. This is good. I'm getting a high intent score, and Cognigy is finding my slot matches. We also see a false positive. Cognigy sees the word can and matches it to an airport code. That doesn't affect the intent match at all, so we can ignore it. We're giving some useful information to the user, but it's a lot of text presented all at once. It could also benefit from some images if I need help visualizing what a compliant bag might look like. So instead of just plain text, let me add some images. I'll change my default reply to a gallery. And I'll add 2 cards, one for carry-ons and one for personal items. I'll add my image, title, and description for each. I'll save and let's take a look. I like how this breaks up the information and provides some visuals for the user, but I want to provide a little more context for the user when I present these options. It could be that a default reply isn't going to provide the user experience I want. So I'll handle this in a flow instead. That will let me provide multiple outputs to the user and a complete contextual response. In my default reply, I'll click Reset to clear the default reply, and then I'll save. I'll switch over to my chart view and see what I can create here. When I was just using default replies, Cognigy would detect my intent, respond, and not bother with the flow. But now that we're working in a flow, we need to make sure to only give a response to the user who triggers the carry-on intent. I could start off my flow with an if statement. Let's try that. I'll add an if node. I'll make the condition be intent equals baggage rules carry on. If I get an intent match, I'll output some messages to the user. I'll create two say nodes. In my first say node, I'll give the user a general response, and then I'll provide some details. Now I'll add my nice visualizations. And my detailed information. Let's test that. I'll ask, can I bring my ski bag? I get both say nodes now, and I'm pretty happy. One small change could be to add a little pause between say nodes. To do this, I'll add a sleep node. This just puts a pause in the conversation. I'll add the sleep node after my first say node. Now I'll enter a number of milliseconds for the pause. A millisecond is 1,000th of a second, so just imagine the number of seconds you want and multiply it by 1,000. I'll add a 3-second pause, so I'll enter 3,000 here. Let's see how it works. Now you'll see there is a little bit of a pause, giving the user a chance to start reading the first bubble before Cognigy presents the next ones. Okay, I like that. Let's take a step back as we think about our next intent. I've created an if statement here that handles the carry-on intent. I could handle my other intent on my else branch and check the intent again. But this flow could have dozens of intents. And my flow will be really big and confusing if I have to have dozens of if nodes. An alternative to an if node is a lookup node. Lookup nodes are good when there are more than two options. Lookup nodes are ideal for handling flows with multiple intents. I'll add one after my start node. What you'll see is the main lookup node with 3 nodes underneath it. The lookup node itself specifies a value. I'll click on it so you can see. In the type field, I have intent selected. That means that Cognigy is going to check the intent that's been identified. Each of the case nodes underneath the lookup node will address a particular value for the intent. I'll click on the first case node and choose the intent I want to handle. I'll choose baggage rules, carry on, and save. Now I'll drag all of those say nodes under my case node. And I'll delete my if node since we don't need that anymore. When I test, can I bring my backpack on board? I get the same result, which is what I want. Now I want to handle my checked bag intent. I'll click on the second case node and add it there. What do I do if I want to handle additional intents here? I can just click the plus sign next to the lookup node to add new case nodes, and I can keep adding as many as I want. Note that the first node is called default. Under the default node, I can put any message or logic that I want if I don't get one of the intent matches. So I'll add a say node here that can handle the case where we don't get a match. For now, I'll just say, sorry, I didn't get that. You can ask me about carry-on bags or checked bags. So, testing it out one more time. Can I bring my backpack on board? And if I say, is my flight late? I'll get the default message. Alright, now let's address the checked baggage intent. For this one, I'll give different responses depending on whether or not they're in first class and how heavy their bag is. So I'll add a question node, and it'll say, I can help determine your baggage fees. Are you flying first class? I'll keep it as a yes/no question and save. I'll add an if statement to determine whether they said yes, and I'll respond if so. I'll use my last question result token and select is yes as my condition. On my then branch, I'll let the user know the bag policy for first-class travelers. If they aren't flying first class, I want to know the weight of their bag, so I'll add a number question. For my responses, there are 3 different categories: 50 pounds or less, between 50 pounds and 70 pounds, and then more than 70 pounds. I'll add a series of ifs to address these. In my first if, I'll see if the result is greater than 70. Then I'll add a say node and let the user know that the airline does not accept bags over 70 pounds, 32 kilograms. Now I'll add another if to see if the bag is 50 pounds or greater. And now I'll add my remaining say nodes to complete the dialog. If the bag is less than 50 pounds, I'll give the users a link to view more information. You may recall from the session on Say nodes that I can either do this with buttons or with HTML links. Since I haven't presented buttons for any of my other answers, I'll just embed an HTML link. I'll go to the website that helps me create links. I get this link, and I'll add it to my Say node. Hopefully this makes sense. I first check if the bag is greater than 70. If not, I check if it is greater than or equal to 50. And if not, it must be less than 50. Let's test it out. Then I'll say no. Then I'll say 10 pounds. And here I get an unexpected message. The bot doesn't understand 10 pounds as a slot match for a number. What if I say 20 pounds? I get the same error. Maybe it needs metric notation. I'll try 10 kg. And it works. Why is this? Does Cognigy make you use the metric system? It's actually not that. I looked at the detailed Cognigy context, something we'll look at in depth in the Flow Developer course, and found that Cognigy sees 10 pounds as a money slot. It's a match for the British currency type rather than a number. So how do I get around this? There are several approaches I could take. I could go to Manage and then Settings and disable the money slot. That works if I won't need to use the money slot in this flow, but just in case I might want to do that in the future, I need another approach. I could present quick replies to the user. I can make 3 quick reply buttons and let the user click on an option. For my postback value, I could send a number that matches each range. This is a nice solution, but it only works if the user clicks the buttons. If this were a voice scenario, for example, I wouldn't see those options. The simplest and most comprehensive approach would be to change the question type to a text question. This will let the user type in anything, and will use Cognigy's built-in slot matching to check the result. I'll go to each of my ifs and change the last question result to the first number slot. So if the user says 20 pounds, the first number slot will be 20. Let's test it out one more time. What have we lost by changing this from a number to text? Well, since the user can enter anything now, we have to account for them not entering a number. To keep things simple, I'll check to see if we have a number, and if not, I'll just give them a link to the website. I'll add a new if under my question. For the condition, I'll choose first number slot, and then I'll choose exists. This means that if the user entered a number, then continue. Otherwise, we'll just give them the link. I'll add a Say node off of my Else node with the link information. Now I want to drag the next if onto the then branch. All right, we've got it. First we check if there's a number, and if there is, we check which range it's in and respond to the user accordingly. The reason I wanted to show this example of the logical but unexpected handling of 20 pounds is to highlight that we're working with language and collaborating with our AI to understand what users mean. Sometimes there are surprises, and we need to adjust our flows to account for real-world dialogue and interpretation. Okay, I want to add 2 more refinements to this flow. The first is to add a welcome message that greets users and explains the scope of the bot. We can do this easily with a once node. A once node executes a set of nodes one time in a conversation, which is perfect for a greeting. After my start node, I'll add a once node and it automatically creates an onFirstTime branch and an afterwards branch. After the onFirstTime node, I'll add a say node that welcomes people to the flow. I'll create a gallery and add a card. And I'll save. I'll test it out by just saying hi. It gives me the nice greeting, but then it tells me it didn't understand what I said. The reason, if you look at the chart, is that the lookup node is executing immediately after the say node. If we drag the lookup node under afterwards, we fix that. The say node executes and then goes all the way to the end. The second refinement I want is to handle the default intent a little differently. Right now, if I say something like, I need to check my flight status, I'll get the sorry I didn't get that response. I actually want to guide users towards questions the bot can actually handle by adding some quick replies that automatically trigger an intent. I'll show you. I'll open the say node and change the output to text with quick replies. I'll add 2 quick replies. For the first one, I'll make the button title Carry On Rules. For the postback value, I'll put C intent, baggage rules carry on. I'll show you what this does in a minute. For the other quick reply, I'll make the button title Baggage Fees. For the postback value, I'll put C intent, baggage rules checked bags. This notation, C intent followed by the name of the intent, tells Cognigy to automatically trigger the intent match. When we test it out, I'll say hi, then flight status. Then I'll click baggage fees and it triggers the right intent. You'll also notice the bubble that says C intent baggage rules. Don't worry, this doesn't show up in the web chat. Let's take a quick look. In the web chat, Cognigy will output the button title and take the user to the right intent. If I were to improve this flow one step further, I would take all of the logic we created for the bag check fees, all of those nested if statements, and put it in its own flow. In the Flow Developer course, we'll learn how to do this so we can keep our flows simple, easy to manage, and straightforward to understand. There's so much more to learn about creating flows in Cognigy. The objective in this video was to take some of the basic concepts, intents, lexicons, flows, say nodes, question nodes, if nodes, and lookup nodes, to create a flow that provides a complete experience. I hope it was helpful. to see how to start with use cases and make your way into flow development.